Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It's Wednesday and we're still in Isaiah 6. It begins by saying, "It was in the year King Uzziah died that I saw the Lord. He was sitting in a lofty throne. The train of his robe filled the temple. Attending him were mighty seraphim, each having 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, and 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. They were calling out to each other, 'Holy, holy is the Lord of heaven's armies. The whole earth is filled with his glory.'" Now, this doesn't say that he saw the vision because of the death. The death just seems to mark the time that it happened. But in my experience, death is a motivator towards spiritual things. Whether you're dying or somebody else has died, passed away, or someone else is dying. Why do you think death, the fear of death, the moment of death is such a motivator for us to seek God and notice spiritual things more?
I think it's a reminder of how short our life truly is and that it is finite. Because I think we can get caught up in the day-to-day things that seem mundane, that you do them the same way every day for years. And that sometimes it can feel like that's just a road you can't see the end to, because none of us know when our death is going to come. And I think we just kind of keep it in the back of our minds and don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. And then you get faced with the reality when there's a death of someone that's close to you or, a leader or a public figure.
Yeah, death is the event that makes us realize that we're not going to live in our current state forever. There's coming an end point here in this life, and a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about it. They want to avoid it, even having the conversation about it. But it's a reality. In fact, in Ecclesiastes, it says it's better to go to a funeral than a party. And I've used that in some funerals, and at first people go like, "Oh, that's in the Bible."
And invited him.
Exactly. And, but the benefits are you're forced to stop and pause and think about it, and realize there's an afterlife, there's an eternity waiting, what am I doing about it? Where am I going to be? All those things come into play. And it seems like in that moment when you're gathered at like a funeral event, that's the one time people are just kind of like, they have to think about it.
Yeah, I think funerals death in general tends to point you to God in general, makes you think about it, and there are times we're prepared for it, so as people get older, I recently read this interesting statistic. It said if you live to be, I don't remember, it was 61, 62, 63, it was the early 60s pieces. If you lived to be that old, there was a really high probability you were going to live to be like 80 or 85, if you lived to be that. But it went on to say the reason was that most people who make it that far are going to live long lives. It is the tragic ones before that. In our community recently, we had a young man who died in a hunting accident. I think he was 15 years old. And, I had a friend that just passed away. He was 56, and those are, both are tragic, you just don't expect, nobody lives out their life thinking it's 15 I'm going to pass or 55 I'm going to pass. And, but they happen. And on the other end of that, I think it's particularly those moments. In this case, it was a national figure. It was the king who passed away. And, those moments can cause people to evaluate, well, who's next? What are we going to, what's the direction going to be? I'm fortunate. Both of Barbara's parents are passed. My parents are still living. I'm extremely fortunate at my age to have both of my parents. At some point, though, it's going to come. This lady reminded me of a conversation I had this past week. Her husband died, and some of you are going to think I'm crass when she just thought it was funny. He was when they first came to see me, which probably was 6, 7 years ago. He was 88, and she was like 68.
Wow.
And she was wanting to move closer to family. They lived here in North Carolina. She was wanting to live closer to family, and which was up north. And he didn't want to go back to cold weather. Mm. And they were like on the verge of divorce over it. And then just, you know how stupid and crass I can be. In a moment of crassness, I said, "Why are y'all arguing about this?"
It won't be long.
Why don't you just wait on him to die? I mean, he can't be around much longer.
Really?
And they both lied. He said, "Exactly. That's exactly right." Well, he eventually moved with her, because we talked through it. I said, we kind of talked through it. And he died. He was in his mid-90s.
He froze to death.
He just recently died,
Oh.
But he had moved back. I mean, and I'm talking about in the last week or two of us recording that, he passed. And she reminded me, she said, "I'm glad I didn't wait him out. We'd still be there." That's what she said. And it was somewhat humorous, at least she could have. But those you expect. Like, when somebody's 88 and they say they died, I'm not surprised. If somebody called today, I think of this, when I see my mom or dad's phone number on my phone, the thing that goes through my mind is, man, I sure hope one of them haven't passed away. Because it could happen any day. Yeah. And in those moments, their spirituality points us back to him. But in the moments of my friend passing or this young boy passing in the community, those tragedies cause us to rethink almost everything. My parents have lived a good long life. I don't know that they've gotten to do everything they wanted to, but for the most part they have. I don't want to die today. Is that bad?
No, I don't think it's bad.
I mean, I do want to. It's not that I don't want to see Jesus, but from a very horizontal standpoint, I want to see my grandkids grow up. I'd love to see them get married, be fulfilled in a career, know that they're following Christ, have made some long-lasting impacts, see some things that I'm doing today come to fruition. That's somewhat selfish, but I also know that there's a real possibility I could get in the car and turn out on 17 and somebody T-bone me, and that's the end of it. Like that could be the end of it. And what death moments cause y'all to reflect spiritually the most?
They all have some degree of impact. You mentioned a young man tragically passing away. That tends to make me think not so much about my own spirituality, but the concern of like my grandkids, for instance, and people under my influence, to make sure that they are ready, that they have that relationship with the Lord. Because the reality is, it could happen today to anybody, and so that would be a reminder and motivate me to try to ensure, to help teach and encourage younger people or those under my influence. And so that would be one example.
I mean, I would agree that all death has a certain effect on us, I think people who, like you said, are either, it seems like an untimely death, or if it's someone who's really close to you in your life, family or a close friend, that has a much different effect on us than somebody we don't know well. But I don't know. For me personally, I feel like I would also agree it may be less of a spiritual thing for me to think about than it is me thinking about the people around me in my life. Like, how would this affect them if this happened to me at this age? Because, I mean, I think about, like, we still have 2 kids, that aren't grown and out of the house yet, and think about things like that. How would my family handle it? How would my husband make out? Just
Because I've seen people regroup and thrive in those situations, and I've seen other people utterly destroyed and never recover from
right.
it.
Yeah.
It's strange the effect that it can have. Jay, you said it depends on, the young person makes you think about your your grandkids. When I go to a funeral of somebody who has a significant legacy, so like I watched the memorial service for Charles Stanley, and those moments make me want to be more intentional about my moments. I want to make sure that the time I've got left, I'm using to leave a mark that is important. Not chasing after stuff that don't matter, but leaving an important mark. And I do think each one has its different spiritual impact. I just think we need to be aware of it, and it doesn't hurt us to stop and reflect. Do y'all like going to funerals? Well, you apparently do.
I don't have an aversion to it. Let's just put it that way.
You don't go out of your own free will, though, most of the time.
We won't discuss some of those things. But, I provide a service. I perform a lot of funerals or preach a lot of funerals, for people who don't have a pastor. And that's often, part of the discussions that take place with family or those closest to them, that, okay, this person, what kind of life did they live? What kind of legacy are they leaving behind? Where are you at? What is going to be said about you, moving forward? Because again, death, funerals, the planning, those discussions kind of force you to a place where you have to at least consider some of those things. And some people, I'm convinced, make good decisions moving forward as it relates to their spirituality. And some people do not, once they get past that bump, and they just continue to move on.
I mean, I think ultimately we need to be aware of what Christ has called us to do with our lives. And I do think it's really important for us to know how to enjoy life and really appreciate all the beautiful and wonderful things He's given us to enjoy on a regular basis. And then I also think that, we just need to be aware of the fact that if we are helping lead people to Christ, then that really is the most important thing that we can be doing with our lives. Because our hope is, of course, that then those people are going to do the same thing. And that's the most important mark that we can leave in this world, whether anybody remembers our names for it or not.
Yeah.
But that this is going to continue. Because if people in generations before us had not done that, then we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about this and having the life and salvation that we have.
Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. Hope you'll be back tomorrow as we continue talking about the book of Isaiah.